Kamala Harris will break through the glass ceiling and become the first woman president of the United States. That's where the keys stand. I'm willing to say I was wrong.
Was it because America is still not ready for a woman president, especially of color? The man who's had a record when it comes to US elections, always getting it right, but this time around, Professor Allan Lichtman did not get it right. Professor Lichtman, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. What happened this time? 13 keys to the White House.
Well, as I've said many times, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not Speaker Mike Johnson, who thinks the Almighty talks to him. My system, the 13 Keys, is based on history. It's based on a lot of history. Developmentally, it goes all the way back to 1860. And predictively, since I predicted Ronald Reagan's reelection in April 1982, when 60% of Americans said he was too old to run again. But patterns of history can be broken. And I see what happened this time to break the pattern of history was the explosion of disinformation. We've always had disinformation, but never close to the degree that we've seen in this election, and it's pervaded every aspect of the election. Starts with Fox News, goes through other conservative media outlets, goes through the conservative podcasters with tens of millions of viewers. And then we have something brand new, a 300 billionaire, Elon Musk, putting his thumb on the scales. Do you know he is worth more than most of the nations of the world in terms of their annual GDP? And he controls the incredibly important communication outlet X, formerly Twitter. It's been reported, and I believe it, that his disinformation has been viewed by billions, not millions, but billions of viewers. And so deeply inserted in the electorate is disinformation. They believe that inflation is still going up when it's gone down by 75%. They think the stock market and growth and employment have been tanked when they're all doing robustly. I guarantee you, when Donald Trump takes office, he'll take credit for all of these things that his disinformation has been trashing. A look at immigrants. You know, the disinformation is that immigrants are these bloodthirsty killers, particularly undocumented immigrants. The truth is, they are the single most law-abiding segment of society, committing crimes, including violent crimes, less than half the rate of that of native-born Americans. And there's a reason for it. They don't want to be caught up in the criminal justice system. And contrary to disinformation, they contribute many billions of dollars in tax revenue, and they are the mainstay of the agricultural industry, the construction industry, the hospitality industry, the personal service industry. Studies show that Trump's deportation plans could drive the economy into recession and crime. You know, people believe that crime is soaring. In fact, crime has gone down last year and this year. Hurricane relief, the lie that hurricane relief is being diverted to migrants, totally untrue. And meanwhile, the mainstream media is obsessed with meaningless polls, all of them in the margin of error, has given almost no counter to all of this disinformation, or spent very much time talking about the consequences of the election. Plus, the media is also, the mainstream media, being taken over by the billionaires. Look what happened to the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post.
Right. Right. Professor Lichtman, of the 10 elections, you got one wrong in the past, but that you consider a stolen election. That was the Al Gore election. And now we have the Trump election, which clearly has a mandate that went to Trump. When it comes to Trump, apart from disinformation, the fact that people were willing to believe what was being given to them as information, as news, is that a worry? Is that a worrying trend that Kamala Harris tried to say for all the statements and remarks coming out from the Trump camp that this is not what America is? that indeed it does seem like America is, in a way, what or how the Republicans are thinking.
Well, it remains to be seen. I think we're on a precipice here. Uh, Look, America has always been kind of suspended between two poles. On the one hand, we are this open, tolerant, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multiracial society. We are a melting pot, a nation of immigrants. On the other hand, there's this dark side that runs through American history of we are a society that is xenophobic, deeply distrustful of the other, a society with an incredible history of racism. We were one of the last countries to abolish slavery. We had to fight a war to do it. That was followed by Jim Crow discrimination, which didn't even begin to be dismantled until the 1960s. We are deeply misogynist. Women did not universally get the right to vote till 1920, did not get equality in education until the 1970s. And all of these elements persist. And we're seeing the clash of these two forces. And I'm very worried about the outcome. Plus, I'm a great devotee of the philosopher Hannah Arendt. And as she has noted, once you dissolve truth, once disinformation takes hold, then democracy dissolves with it. That, of course, was the wisdom of Thomas Jefferson, so many 100 years ago, who believed you had to have truth to have democracy.
Is this a personal blow to you, and will you continue predicting elections in the coming future as well?
Well, I have 4 years to make that decision. And I'm much more worried, of course, about our democracy than I am about the keys. I think, the keys are the fact that they failed our harbinger of deep problems with our democracy. But yes, I fully intend to examine events over the next several years to reconsider the keys. And, if I'm still strong and healthy, to return in 1981. Unlike a lot of others, I've not tried to squirm out of my prediction. I'm willing to say I was wrong, and I am reevaluating. Look at some of the other forecasters, like, the pollsters. Oh, we weren't really wrong because we told you all our polls were within the margin of error. Well, guess what? That makes all your polls noise and all your polls useless. And it is just horrific that the media has spent so much more time on these useless polls than on what's really at stake in this election.
But is this a personal blow to you, for somebody who's almost got all elections right?
I've said many times, of course I can be wrong. I'm a human being. No human being is perfect. And, I'm willing to accept my own imperfections. But what has bothered me is all the hate that has been leaped upon me, scurrilous, vulgar, violent, threatening communications being swatted and doxxed and, attacked. There's no place for that. And I've been doing this for 42 years, never come close to experiencing it. Again, that's the dark side, the violent side of American politics, stoked by Donald Trump, who constantly evokes violent rhetoric, talking about he wouldn't mind if they shot through the press to try to get to him. He was talking about, guns firing in the face of Liz Cheney. So yeah, that's another thing I'm really worried about. Not for me. I have police protection. The FBI is notified. My house is secured. Anyone who tries anything will be very sorry. But I'm worried about, the evocation of violence and the loss of truth for our society and our democracy. As I said, we're poised between, two different versions of America, and I don't know which version is going to triumph in the end.
So you have faced threats and you have security. Am I right? Did I get that
Absolutely.
right?
We have police protection. We have total security.
Okay. In terms of the election,
But that should not be necessary. All I've done is exercise my free speech.
It shouldn't be. But in terms of the 13 keys, we will talk about that. But in a way, do you think there was also personal bias that you wanted to will a democratic win, and that came in the way of your scientific 13 keys?
I've been accused of that, and it's baseless.
Mhm.
I've been doing this for 42 years. If I simply predicted according to my political views, I wouldn't be right 10 out of 10 times. I'd be useless.
Mhm.
I have, in fact, predicted the two most conservative presidents of our time, both against the grain of the polls and the pundits. Ronald Reagan in April 1982, when 60% of Americans said he was too old to run again and his approval ratings were historically low. Donald Trump in 2016, when all the polls were pointing to Hillary Clinton. The eminent Princeton University Consortium gave Hillary Clinton a 99% chance of winning, but I still was predicting Donald Trump, which you can imagine these predictions did not make me very popular in
Mhm.
90% plus Democratic DC, where I teach at American University. But I did get a note after my 2016 prediction on the Washington Post, where I predicted Trump's win. It said, "Congrats, Professor, good call," and in big Sharpie letters, Donald J. Trump. So those same folks who think I'm biased now love the fact that I predicted Trump in 2016. I have my own political views. They have nothing to do with my uh, predictions. That's why I trained as an historian for a long time to learn how to search for truth independent of one's own preferences. And that is the most important thing in being a forecaster, more important than knowing math or history or politics.
Two important factors, Professor Lichtman. One is the fact that the immigration had become a very important thing, a very important and polarizing subject. And it did seem like those who were siding with the Republicans went out and voted. On the other hand, the other polarizing issue was abortion and women's rights. And women did not go out and vote. How do you look at this? How do you read this
There is
voting
no
pattern?
way to predict an election by trying to parse it out and looking at the individual issues. There are any number of issues which, as you say, uh, cut both ways. So, I've listened to a lot of this post-election commentary, and you can take it and do with it what the great British philosopher David Hume said you should do to works of superstition: consign it to the flames. It's Monday morning quarterbacking, sports talk radio without the fun. Half the commentators are saying Harris lost because she was too progressive. The other half, you heard Bernie Sanders, Harris lost because she wasn't progressive enough. You know, After the fact commentary when you know the answer is absolutely worthless. That said, I will critique the Democrats in two ways. One, and I did this at the time, this is not Monday morning quarterbacking. I blasted the Democrats at the time for openly, viciously trashing their elected president and elected nominee right out in public. I have never seen that before, and I think that tainted uh, any Democratic nominee. And now those same folks, Pelosi and company, are not looking in the mirror, blaming anyone but themselves, including Joe Biden. The other critique of Democrats, aside from being spineless like that, is they are terrible at messaging. People think Biden did nothing. In fact, he has more domestic accomplishments than any president since the 1960s, but nobody knows it because the Democrats are so abysmal about messaging. This is, again, not Monday morning quarterback. I've been saying this for decades.
Right. One important factor, if I could ask you, and that has to do with the wars. How did that really play out in these elections? Because we do know that a lot of people, a lot of voters who are Democratic voters, were not happy with the decision of the government, Biden-Harris administration, to be so quiet on the Israel-Hamas war and allow civilian deaths. Do you think that played to their disadvantage?
Who knows? Again, you can't pick out one issue, but already some of the Arab Americans, and certainly not all of them, but some voted for Trump, are already having buyer's
Yes.
remorse, realizing he appointed an ambassador to Israel who said the Palestinian people don't even exist. This is a guy who wanted to ban all Muslims from the US. And you think he's going to be better for Arab Americans than Biden? Again, just massive disinformation guiding voters.
In your 13 keys now that you spoke of and that you have built over time and have been working on, what are the changes that you're looking at? Because you have been talking about disinformation. How much of that has been a key factor in all the 13 keys?
Oh, I think it's affected a lot of the keys. I talked about the economy, for example. I
Hmm.
have quantitative indicators on the economy, but I don't know yet how you adjust for disinformation. That's something I have 4 years. I'm not going to make a snap judgment after a week, but I'm
Hmm.
studying and pondering. And unlike, the Monday morning quarterbacks, I have a basis for reconsideration, a 42-year record.
Right. And I know you're really short of time. So just a couple of questions on your analysis of the election and how Trump is going to act as a political, as a professor, somebody who has been studying and reading the entire political landscape of the United States of America. In terms of policies, what do you think Trump will bring to the table that could be disastrous for
I
America? We're
think a
looking at
lot.
a lot of appointments that could be questionable. We do not know whether they'll go through confirmation, but they do have majority in the Senate and the House now.
One another thing I've been screaming about ever since the advent of Trump is I've been blasting those foolish people who say, oh, he doesn't really mean what he says. He's
Mm.
just saying this, it's hyperbole. That's exactly how authoritarianism takes hold, when you don't believe what an authoritarian is saying. Trump now, through his appointments, like Matt Gaetz or Pete Hegseth, has made it crystal clear he is going to do exactly what he said, launch a campaign of revenge against his political enemies, eliminate the independence of federal agencies, put his own thumb on everything, and begin the disastrous policy of deportation. And it's not like undocumented immigrants live in separate communities with a big sign, undocumented immigrants live here. They are integrated into our society. They are married to US citizens. 4.4 million children in America have at least one parent who's undocumented. So you are going to violate the lives of up to, many millions of Americans, and you'll ensnare US citizens because the data you have is utterly obsolete and unreliable, and you are going to crush the economy. So, on so many levels, in terms of the rule of law, adherence to the Constitution, the liberties of Americans, uh, the violation of people's rights, the torpedoing of the economy, I'm very, very worried. And I think a lot of people fell right into the trap of discounting what Trump had to say.
Did Kamala Harris have anything better to offer? Because uh, we do know you're saying that the record on economy under Biden administration was quite strong, but was it because America's still not ready for a woman president, especially of color?
Well, I gave you my broader analysis, which would apply to any Democratic candidate, but I also gave you my analysis of the importance of racism, misogyny, and xenophobia, and a woman president who is also a woman of color, of mixed African and Asian descent, is a particular target of that. Certainly, that was an element. I got time for maybe one more question.
Just one more question and final
Great.
question in terms of foreign policy. He withdrew from the Paris Agreement. He withdrew from JCPOA. He intends to withdraw from the Russia-Ukraine war, and he intends to really solidify Israel's position. Where will that put the world at and America at in terms of the superpower that it was? And I don't think it any longer is.
You know, since the 1940s, collective security with our allies has kept America safe. And there have been those who tried to torpedo it. Dwight Eisenhower, the great general, ran for president in 1952 to oppose the isolationists within his own party and establish collective security. Trump threatens to torpedo that collective security that has kept America and the West safe for so many decades. I'm also very worried about his kowtowing to dictators. Look, he appointed Tulsi Gabbard, director of national intelligence, someone who has very close ties to Vladimir Putin. And Trump seems to be taking Putin's side in the war in Ukraine. So, yes, I'm very worried that the long tradition of collective security and opposition to murderous dictators that has served the West so well will be undermined in a Trump administration. Although I'm a bit encouraged, I think the one positive appointment he made, presuming he's going to stick to it, is Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. All
On
right,
that
thank you
note,
so much.
Professor Allan Lichtman, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global.
Can I
Hoping
say
and wishing the best to you for the future.
thank you? Let me say one more thing.
Yes, surely.
Anyone can catch I'm not stopping. You can catch my continued analysis on my live show every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern US time at Allan Lichtman YouTube, ALLANLICHTMAN YouTube. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.